Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are going to take a deep dive into IELTS academic writing.
That's right.
We're going to be focusing on how to score a band 7 or higher,
We are.
which is like the holy grail for a lot of people taking this test.
It is. And we're going to go beyond just like what the test is and really look at the do's and don'ts so you can actually achieve that score.
Okay, so before we get into that, just to give everyone like a quick overview, we're talking about IELTS academic writing, which is a test that assesses your English proficiency in an academic setting. It's used for university admissions, things like that.
Yeah. Really important for anyone who wants to study or work in an English-speaking environment.
Exactly. And there are 2 tasks, Task 1 and Task 2. And did you know Task 2 actually counts for double the marks compared to Task 1?
It's true, which is why we're going to be spending a little bit more time on Test 2 today, but we'll cover both.
Okay, so Task 1, you're presented with some visual information, like a graph, a chart, a table, maybe even a process or a map.
Yeah. And you have to summarize, describe, or explain that information in writing.
Okay, and Task 2, that's more of your classic essay format.
Right. You're given a point of view, an argument, or a problem, and you have to respond to it in a well-structured essay.
Okay, so that's the basic format. But to really nail these tasks and get that band 7 or higher, we need to understand how they're assessed.
Exactly. There are 4 assessment criteria for each task.
Okay, lay it on us.
So we have task achievement for task 1, or task response for task 2. Then there's lexical resource, coherence, and cohesion. And finally, grammatical range and accuracy.
Okay, that's a mouthful. But they're actually not as complicated as they sound. Let's break them down a bit. Starting with task achievement and task response, I'm guessing that's basically about answering the question and fulfilling the task requirements.
Yeah, pretty much. In task 1, it's about how well you analyze and summarize the visual data. Did you capture the key trends? Did you support your observations with data from the visual? And in task 2, it's about how effectively you respond to the prompt. Did you present a clear, well-developed argument? Did you address all aspects of the question?
Okay, so it's not just about writing well. It's about writing well in a way that directly answers the question. Makes sense. Now, what about lexical resource? Is that just a fancy way of saying vocabulary?
Yeah, basically, it's about using a wide range of vocabulary appropriately and accurately. But it's not just about using big words. It's about choosing the right words to convey your meaning effectively. Think of it like having a toolbox full of different tools. You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb, would you?
Definitely not. Broken bulb, bruised thumb. Not a good combination. So with vocabulary, it's about precision and appropriateness, not just showing off.
Exactly. Using a complex word incorrectly can actually harm your score more than using a simpler word correctly.
Okay, good to know. And that brings us to coherence and cohesion. Those sound like they go hand in hand. What's the difference?
So coherence is about how easily your writing can be understood. Think of it as the logical flow of your ideas. Does your writing make sense? Do your ideas connect smoothly? Cohesion, on the other hand, is about how you link those ideas together. Are you using transition words and phrases effectively? Does your writing have a natural rhythm and flow?
Okay, so basically it's about making sure your writing is a smooth, enjoyable read, not a jumbled mess of thoughts.
Exactly.
And then finally we have grammatical range and accuracy, which is, I guess, pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. The examiners are looking at your ability to use a variety of sentence structures correctly and avoid those pesky grammatical errors.
Makes sense. So we've got the assessment criteria down. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty, the do's and don'ts for each task. Starting with task 1. So you're faced with a graph, a chart, some kind of visual information. What are some key strategies to make sure you're on track for that band 7 or higher?
Okay, so for task 1, let's start with the essential adutes. First and foremost, organize your response strategically. Think of it as a 3-part structure: introduction, overview, and then main features.
Okay, so kind of like a mini essay, but focused on analyzing that visual information.
Exactly. Your introduction should be concise. Clearly state what the visual represents. Then, in your overview, highlight the key trends or patterns. But without getting bogged down to specific details, save that for the main features section, where you'll delve deeper into specific data points and support your observations with evidence from the visual.
Got it. So structure is key. Now, what about the don'ts? What are some common pitfalls to avoid in task 1?
One of the biggest mistakes people make is simply listing data from the visual without any analysis or interpretation. Remember, your job isn't to be a robot. It's to demonstrate your ability to think critically and draw insights from the data. Don't just tell me the numbers, tell me what they mean.
All right, so don't be a data narrator, be a data detective. I like that. Okay, so we've covered the do's and don'ts for task 1. Now let's move on to task 2, the essay portion of the exam. What are some key strategies for success there?
All right, well, for task 2, clarity is king. Imagine you're a lawyer presenting a case to a jury. Your opening statement, or in this case, your introduction, needs to clearly state your position or opinion on the issue at hand.
Okay, so think persuasive essay, but with a laser focus on structure and logic.
Exactly. And just like a lawyer presents evidence to support their case, you need to develop your arguments logically in the body paragraphs and back them up with solid examples.
Right, so it's not enough to just state your opinion. You need to convince the reader with strong arguments and supporting evidence.
Precisely.
Now, we've talked a lot about using a wide range of vocabulary, but how can we do that without making mistakes or using words incorrectly?
My advice is to stick with words you're absolutely confident about. Don't try to force in a word just because it sounds impressive if you're not 100% sure of its meaning or how to use it in a sentence.
So comfort and accuracy over flashiness.
Exactly. It's much better to use a simple word correctly than to misuse a complex one.
Okay, that makes sense. Any other vocabulary tips?
Pay attention to collocations. These are words that naturally go together, like heavy rain instead of strong rain. The more you read and listen to English, the more you'll pick up on these natural pairings.
It's all about sounding natural and fluent.
Exactly.
Now, I know this might sound obvious, but it's worth repeating. Proofread, proofread, proofread.
Oh, absolutely. Even small grammatical errors or misspelled words can really hurt your score.
It's like leaving a stain on a perfectly ironed shirt.
Exactly. Take your time, read your work slowly and carefully, and double-check everything.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from understanding the assessment criteria to specific do's and don'ts for both Task 1 and Task 2. But before we wrap up, I think it's important to emphasize something we mentioned earlier. Task 2 carries twice the weight of Task 1 in the final band score.
It's true. So while you need to do well in both tasks, your performance on Task 2 really has the potential to make or break your overall score.
So how can our listeners make sure they're dedicating enough time and effort to both tasks?
Well, it's about strategic planning and self-awareness. After listening to all this information, it's crucial to analyze your own strengths and weaknesses. For instance, if you're feeling shaky about essay structure and argument development for Task 2, that's where your focus should lie. Or perhaps vocabulary feels like your Achilles heel. Then expanding your lexical range needs to be your priority.
So it's like a personalized training regimen, focusing on the areas that need the most work.
Exactly.
And remember, you don't have to go through this alone. There are tons of great resources out there to guide you, like the official IELTS website. It's a goldmine of information with free practice materials, sample answers, and expert tips from experienced examiners.
It's a great resource.
And there are also online courses, webinars, and even one-on-one tutoring available.
Yeah. Those can be really helpful for getting personalized feedback and guidance.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. But before we move on to part 2, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. Considering the weight of Task 2, how will you tailor your preparation to ensure success in both tasks and ultimately achieve that Band 7 goal?
It's all about strategy and putting in the work. But with the right approach, anyone can achieve their desired score.
Absolutely. All right, we'll be back in part 2 to dive deeper into some specific strategies and techniques. Until then, happy writing.
See you then. So let's dive a little deeper into those do's and don'ts for Task 2.
Okay, sounds good.
So first off, you want to make sure your essay is structured effectively.
Structure, always key.
It is. A clear introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And remember, each paragraph should have a clear topic sentence that outlines the main point of that paragraph.
Okay, so it's like each paragraph is a mini argument supporting your overall thesis.
Exactly.
And what about transitions between paragraphs?
Transitions. They're crucial for a cohesive and well-structured essay. Use words and phrases like however, moreover, in addition, to connect your ideas and make your writing flow smoothly.
So they're like the glue that holds everything together.
That's a good way to put it.
Now let's talk about arguments. How can our listeners make sure they're crafting arguments that will really impress the examiners?
Well, one of the most important things is to support your claims with evidence.
Evidence, always important.
It is. Don't just make general statements. Back them up with facts, statistics, examples, or even personal anecdotes.
Right, so it's like you're building a case.
Exactly. You need to present your evidence convincingly to persuade the reader. And remember to cite your sources if you're using any external information.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, we've talked a lot about vocabulary, but I think it's worth emphasizing that using complex vocabulary correctly is really crucial for a high score.
Absolutely. Examiners are looking for a wide range of vocabulary used accurately and appropriately.
So how can our listeners expand their vocabulary without making mistakes?
Well, one way is to read widely in English. Pay attention to how words are used in different contexts. You can also keep a vocabulary notebook where you jot down new words and their definitions. And don't be afraid to use a thesaurus to find synonyms.
But always double-check the meaning. Make sure it fits the context.
Exactly.
And of course, practice makes perfect.
Definitely. The more you write, the more confident you'll become in using a wider range of vocabulary.
So read, write, repeat.
That's the key.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to take a quick break. We'll be back in part 3 to talk about some more specific tips and strategies for IELTS academic writing.
Sounds good.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive.
We're back.
So we've talked about a lot of different strategies and techniques for IELTS academic writing, but I think it's helpful to see these things in action.
Definitely.
So let's take a look at some sample answers for both Task 1 and Task 2, and we'll analyze what makes them effective.
Sounds good.
And then we can really break down how these techniques are applied in a real writing sample.
Right, because sometimes it's easier to see it than just hear about it.
Exactly. Now remember, these sample answers are just examples.
Yeah.
There's no one right way to write an IELTS essay.
Definitely not.
The key is to find what works best for you.
And to demonstrate your English proficiency to the best of your ability.
Exactly. So let's start with Task 1. We've got a sample answer here that describes a line graph showing the population growth of a particular city over time.
Okay, let's have a look.
First thing I notice is the clear 3-part structure.
Yeah, it's got that introduction, overview, and main features.
And the language is very precise and focused on the data.
It is. No unnecessary fluff or irrelevant information.
Right. It's all about getting straight to the point and analyzing the trends shown in the graph.
And the vocabulary is on point, using words like fluctuated, peaked, and declined to really show a good grasp of lexical resource.
Exactly. And the grammar is flawless.
It is, which is obviously crucial for a high score.
Okay, now let's move on to Task 2. We've got a sample answer here that discusses the advantages and disadvantages of online learning.
All right, let's see it.
So this one has a very clear thesis statement in the introduction.
Yeah, it clearly states the writer's opinion on the topic.
And then each body paragraph focuses on a specific advantage or disadvantage.
Right. With supporting evidence and examples to back up the claims.
And the writer has used a variety of sentence structures and linking words to make the writing flow smoothly.
And the vocabulary is sophisticated and varied. It shows a good command of English.
Exactly. Now, I know we've thrown a lot of information at you today.
Yeah, we have.
But I hope you found this deep dive into IELTS academic writing helpful.
I hope so too.
Remember, the key to success is understanding the assessment criteria.
And practicing your writing skills.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to seek out additional resources.
Yeah, there are tons of great resources available online and in libraries.
So keep practicing, stay focused, and don't